Hello and welcome to Northwest Newsweek. It was Election Day on Thursday in Ontario. We'll have stories about the winners in the 4 races in this region in a little later in the show. But before the vote happened, Progressive Conservative leader Doug Ford made a campaign stop in Thunder Bay last Saturday. He promised to unlock the Ring of Fire should he once again form the government. Justin Hardy was there.
The front line in our battle against Donald Trump's tariffs starts right here in Northern Ontario.
Critical minerals are key to that fight, says Progressive Conservative leader Doug Ford. Ford made a promise to unlock the Ring of Fire should he lead the next provincial government at a campaign stop in Thunder Bay Saturday morning. He committed to getting shovels in the ground faster on major projects. The first part of his plan is to urge the federal government to scrap what he calls redundant and wrong-headed impact assessment requirements.
We need them to scrap unnecessary barriers and red tape that duplicate provincial processes, raise costs, and slow down approvals for critical mineral projects in the Ring of Fire. We'll do whatever it takes to assert our authority over our natural resources, including by taking the federal government to court over the Impact Assessment Act.
Following that, Ford says he'll designate regions where multiple critical mineral deposits are present or likely to be present, including the Ring of Fire, as regions of strategic importance. He also promised to create a number of programs and funds to encourage First Nations participation. Asked if his government would ensure major projects are majority owned by Ontarians, Ford said he wants to, but Ontario needs to be open to diversifying trade.
Yes, it's always ideal to get investment directly here. The First Nations communities will always be involved. It doesn't matter who invests. But I want other countries' money. I want to bring their money into Ontario. That's what creates jobs.
Ontarians head to the polls on February 27th. To find out when, where, and how to vote, check your voter information card. If you haven't yet received your card, you can contact your local returning office. Justin Hardy, TBT News.
Highway safety was a big election topic in the region, and just a few days before the vote, Highway 11 between Longlac and Hearst was closed for around 6 hours due to numerous transports losing control in a winter storm. The highway shutdown was announced by Ontario 511 at around 3 a.m. on Tuesday. This dashcam video recorded later in the morning shows the aftermath as multiple transport trucks could be seen in the ditches along the highway. The issue of transport collisions has been raised along the local campaign trail. Candidates in Thunder Bay Atikokan responded to questions about how to make the highway safer.
So I got to work for Michael. He was big on twinning Thunder Bay to Nipigon. I want to focus on twinning Thunder Bay to Chappaqua because we need to get those plans in place now because it takes a little bit of time to get those highways built. So I think twinning all of 11, 17 where it's combined and also working on 11 and 17 when they're separated as well. It's also working with the federal government to make sure that people on our roads are driving at the safest and highest standards.
One thing that we hear time and again, and we need infrastructure, of course, but we also need that the drivers be properly trained for the road conditions in our area. And right now, the same companies that are training people are giving them their licenses. And there's very little regulation, and none really. There should be oversight by the MTO, but there is very little or none.
Over the last 2.5 years, I've had the opportunity to speak with MTO, the OPP, on the incidence of the accidents that we're seeing on the highway, particularly around commercial truck vehicles. So these are all areas that we're addressing. We've seen a reduction in the number of accidents over 10-year average. We've seen a slight spike recently, but we're taking the measures that we to look into it, to see what the root cause is, so that we can put together a good, solid plan to address it.
The snap election was called by Doug Ford in January, just 2.5 years after his majority government was elected in 2022. And this was the first Ontario election held during the winter months since 1981. The area campaign teams were using snowbanks to prop up election signs in people's front yards. Fortunately for voters, the temperatures got a lot warmer for Election Day, but the recent snowmelt caused some of those campaign signs to tip over. Ford said this election is needed to provide him with a 4-year mandate to combat tariffs from U.S. President Donald Trump. We spoke to the main party candidates in Thunder Bay Superior North about whether this was the right time to have voters go to the polls.
This is pure opportunism. We know that Doug Ford isn't even talking about the issues that affect Ontarians. He's playing Captain Canada and really talking about tariffs over which he has very little power, a little bit, but we should be doing this as a country. We shouldn't be in the middle of an election. It's going to be distorted. Having it at this time in the winter is voter suppression.
Premier Ford did the right thing. He looked at it and he said it very clear to the people. Listen, we have somebody next door that wakes up in the middle of the morning at 3 in the morning and writes a thing on X and says, I'm going to do this, and then wakes up and tells his team he's going to put an executive order. We don't know what that looks like. As we know, there was a promise made about the tariffs, and then he woke up the next day and said, I'm going to change it, and I'm going to put the 25% tariff on metal and aluminum. That impacts Canada and impacts Ontario hugely. The reality is the election was called to make sure, as you heard clearly from the Premier, I need a mandate from the people of Ontario to make sure we move forward with a solid 4 years to fight the administration south of us.
Well, honestly, given what's happening south of the border, I think this is probably the most inopportune time. This is nothing short of a distraction from what we need to be doing. And what we need to be doing is really working together. An election by design, by nature, is ultimately a very divisive thing. It actually pushes people apart. And that's exactly the wrong thing that we really need right now.
Officials with NOSM University were hopeful the next provincial government will work to help them address the doctor shortage in the north. The first place they hope to see work done is updating old funding agreements, some of which are over 15 years old. Justin Hardy had that story before the vote.
Do you know that there are 28,000 people here in the Thunder Bay area that don't have access to a family doctor?
All 4 major provincial party leaders have promised that every Ontarian will have a family doctor or a primary care team within 4 years, should their party be chosen to lead the next government. NOSM University was created to help address the doctor shortage in Northern Ontario. NOSM president Dr. Michael Green says the school could really use the help, and he hopes they can rely on the support of whichever party forms the next government.
Like all of the schools in Ontario, we're still waiting for some updates to our funding agreements to deal with the inflation that's happened in the cost of training medical students and residents. Many of these were fixed a long time ago, some as long ago as 2009.
Green says that due to inflation, the cost of providing medical training is becoming harder and harder, both for medical students and new doctors seeking residency in Toronto and other major cities where specialization is possible. Green says NOSM also needs more capacity built into it to allow the university to continue training people in communities here in the north.
And in particular in family medicine, this means primary care teaching clinic spaces, which we haven't historically had in Northern Ontario, which would be multidisciplinary clinics where people get their care. They go to see a family doctor, but also members of a team, but also that have our students and residents and other kinds of learners there as well, maybe nursing students or nurse practitioner students.
Currently, NOSM University's undergraduate medical education program offers 88 seats for new students each year. The university is planning to expand that to 108 in the near future. Justin Hardy, TBT News.
The big vote happened on Thursday. We have stories about the winners in the 4 ridings in the Northwest right after this short break. Welcome back. It's more of the same across the Northwest. After Thursday's provincial election, all 4 incumbents in our region are heading back to Queen's Park. We'll start off our post-election coverage with the Thunder Bay Superior North riding. NDP incumbent Lise Vaugeois retained her seat, holding off a strong challenge from PC candidate and Marathon Mayor Rick Dumas. Brendan Miller reports.
We're here celebrating tonight that we've won this riding again.
The NDP's Lise Vaugeois has recaptured her seat for Thunder Bay Superior North during this snap provincial election. Though many thought this would be a tighter race between Vaugeois and PC candidate Rick Dumas, the NDP incumbent collected more than 11,000 votes. Dumas finished just under 2,000 votes behind with 9,300. The Liberals' Brian Hamilton finished a distant third with 5,800 votes. Now that she's won a second term on the opposition benches, Vaugeois says she's become more confident in her abilities at Queen's Park, and she's vowing to keep the PC government on a short leash.
I'm ready to go back to Queen's Park and represent Northwestern Ontario and stand strong, make sure that we are actually getting. We heard Doug Ford make a lot of promises tonight. I'm going to hold him to those promises. I'm a little surprised at them because these are things that he's actually not done over the last 7 years.
Dumas was gracious in defeat and says he's looking forward to resuming his duties as the mayor of Marathon. He feels the voters of Thunder Bay Superior North have made their choice in re-electing Vaugeois, and he wants to work with the NDP member to help find the best for constituents in the riding.
At the end of the day, people spoke in Thunder Bay and they wanted to continue working with Lise Vaugeois, and I'll work with Lise as well as my MPP. I'll make sure that she's very, recognized within the arguments that we need in Thunder Bay Superior North. That's the key. Make sure our voice gets to Queen's Park.
After his first dabble with provincial politics with the Ontario Liberals, Brian Hamilton is pleased overall with how things played out. And now he hopes all parties can unite to deal with the tariff threats still coming from U.S. President Donald Trump.
Our volunteers did great, though. We did what we can. It was in the middle of winter. It was a bit of a challenge for us getting out there, meeting people at the door. I think we only had about 7-8 quality days to get out there. But overall, really good. I think the important thing, though, now is that, that as the dust settles, we get behind our leadership and unite as Canadians right now.
With the election wrapped up, Vaugeois now looks forward as to how the NDP can make a difference at Queen's Park and around the province as a whole. Brendan Miller, TBT News.
Turning now to Thunder Bay Atikokan, Progressive Conservative Kevin Holland cruised to victory, earning 45% of the votes. He ended up with nearly 6,000 votes more than NDP's Judith Monteith-Farrell and Liberal candidate Stephen Marguerite. Jessica Clement has that riding wrap-up.
I am incredibly excited to continue the work we have started, and I remain committed to working with you, for you. Here's to another 4 years of great things happening.
Provincial Conservative incumbent Kevin Holland is now a 2-time winner in Thunder Bay Atikokan, claiming victory less than 30 minutes after the polls closed in Ontario. He earned over 13,700 votes. Judith Monteith-Farrell with the NDP finished well back, receiving just over 7,700 votes. Liberal candidate Stephen Marguerite wasn't far behind in third place, earning 7,300 votes. Holland says the win validates the work he has done in the past 2.5 years.
I think we've changed the needle on moved the needle on a lot of things here in Thunder Bay Atikokan on our priorities, and we're noticed. 108 ministers' visits in 2.5 years, $1.3 billion in investments. Those are pretty solid numbers that indicate we're being heard. So I'm really happy with that.
Monteith-Farrell, who represented Thunder Bay Atikokan as MPP from 2018 to 2022, was disappointed in Thursday night's results. She says the winter election made it harder to campaign and thinks if she had a couple more weeks, she could have turned the election around.
I think that our message was getting out there, and if we had had not such a short election, I think we would have had the opportunity to really educate the public. I just so enjoy the people of Thunder Bay and Atikokan. Great community, so many lovely people I got to chat with again and hear their concerns, and I hope this present government actually listens.
As for Marguerite, he says he went into the election knowing the cards were stacked against him, as he was going up against two candidates who have already served at Queen's Park. He remains positive, however, saying he was honored to have so many people vote for him during his first provincial campaign.
I love connecting with people. I love politics. Getting out there, it was a great time. Wished it would have been maybe summer or spring. Winter had a little bit of challenges, but you know what? It was a great campaign. Loved it, and I only had a few days notice this time, but you know what? I got 4 years now to run for next time.
Holland says for his second term, he's going to continue prioritizing growing the area's economy and building a healthy community. Jessica Clement, TBT News.
We now head west to Kenora Rainy River. Progressive Conservative incumbent Greg Rickford has retained his seat at Queen's Park with roughly 60% of the vote. With over 3 times as much support as the runner-up in the riding, the longtime Ford cabinet minister has cemented his place as the Kenora Rainy River MPP. Receiving over 10,500 votes, coming in second was Ontario NDP's Rudy Turtle with around 3,300, and in a close third is Liberal Anthony Leake with just over 3,000 votes. This is the third time Rickford has been elected to represent the riding on behalf of the PCs. He was not available for an interview. We'll close on the regional coverage of the 2025 Ontario election with Kiiwetinoong. Not every poll in the vast riding has reported yet, but the race has been called in favor of NDP incumbent Sol Mamakwa.
I'm very honored and very privileged to be able to have the confidence of the people of Kiiwetinoong to represent them at Ontario Legislature for the next 4 years.
With 45 of the 51 polls reporting, Mamakwa has a huge lead on the runners-up. So far, Mamakwa has received over 3,000 votes, more than twice as many as PC candidate Waylon Scott, who has received over 1,300 votes. In third place is Liberals' Manuela Mikalizi with just 378 votes. Prior to the election, Mamakwa served as deputy leader of the official position. He says his party will work with the PC government for the betterment of the province, but he still holds Doug Ford and his minister to account.
As an official opposition, it is our democratic purpose to be able to question, challenge, and them on some of the policies that they're pushing through. And I think that's and it's nothing personal, right? And I think it's important to be able to keep on putting the government into account.
To other news now, police with NAPS and the OPP, as well as the Ontario Fire Marshal and the Coroner's Office, are investigating after a fatal fire in Sandy Lake First Nation. The home was completely engulfed in flames when first responders arrived on Tuesday afternoon. 2 people managed to escape the blaze, but the remains of a third person were discovered yesterday. Work is underway to identify the victim. The chiefs of Ontario, Anishinaabe, Aski Nation, and Canada have signed an $8.5 billion agreement to reform Ontario's First Nations Child and Family Service Program. This comes after a similar federal agreement was rejected by the Assembly of First Nations last year. This deal affirms First Nations' right to make decisions for their children and provides flexible funding, including support for remote communities. The agreement covers capital projects, prevention services to keep kids with their families, and services for young people who age out of the program. It also includes $258 million for housing to prevent the child apprehension and support reunification. Federal Indigenous Service Minister Patty Haiju says the Ontario agreement is very similar to the federal agreement that was struck down last year, just scaled down.
For example, there was a dispute resolution body that was proposed if there was a dispute between Canada and First Nations around how a particular amount of money should flow or a particular program, should be designed, or any kind of challenge that might arise. There was a dispute mechanism nationally that got scoped down to a provincial size. So there were a number of different areas where the national concept had to be kind of rejigged to fit an Ontario-specific solution.
In a media release, Ontario Regional Chief Abram Benedict and NAN Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler say they're proud of the leadership shown by their organizations. Anishinaabe Aski Nation held their annual youth gathering last weekend. We'll have that story when we come back.
This conference is such an amazing opportunity for NAN youth to come to the city and get to meet people from other communities and get a bit outside of their comfort zone.
Anishinaabe Aski Nation's annual 3-day youth gathering recently wrapped up in Thunder Bay. It provided young people from across NAN territory with the chance to engage in workshops, storytelling, and other initiatives. Emma Chilton has the details.
The annual Anishinaabe Aski Nation Youth Conference was held at the Best Western Nor'Wester this weekend and brings 2 youth from all 49 NAN communities to participate. The gathering lasts 3 days and has workshops, cultural learning activities, and keynote speakers. Oshkarisak Youth Council member Summer Wabas says it's a great opportunity for youth to learn the skills that will help them in life.
This conference is such an amazing opportunity for NAN youth to come to the city and get to meet people from other communities and get a bit outside of their comfort zone.
The workshops are designed to set youth up for a successful future. Some of them were financial literacy, empowerment, Indigenous astronomy, land-based learning, importance of grassroots and community work, and language. NAN Youth Cultural Camps Coordinator Tyler Faubert, who ran the land-based learning workshops, says it's important to connect the youth back to their outdoor teachings.
It's so important to build, develop, and foster a connection in our young people to that land. There's so much. You learn so much when you're out there, not only about the land, but about yourself. And there's so much healing to be had out there. Survival situations. When you're out on the land, we always hear stories, of people who go out in the wintertime and then they don't come back that night. So then we got to go find them. Everybody gets together and, it's for those moments that we try to prepare people so that we have a positive outcome to that story.
This year's gathering theme was telling your stories. Many of the youth and youth council members were given the opportunity to share their stories, teachings, and culture. Waba says it's not necessary to go to youth conferences to get involved with your community and be a leader, but youth are always encouraged to participate and help lead their fellow youth.
I think that it's a really empowering conference. It's really great that NAN brings in so many different role models for people to look up to. And it provides a really safe space for youth to take those healthy risks and be empowered.
Emma Chilton, TBT News.
It's a heartwarming display of support for Cat Lake First Nation. Mikanaku's Children's Fund recently received a substantial donation of hockey equipment from WestJet. The gear was then shipped to the remote community to make the sport more accessible there. Last week, more than 600 kilograms of hockey equipment arrived in Cat Lake. The shipment included everything from sticks and pads to skates and full gear sets. North Star Air facilitated the delivery at no cost, and the love of hockey is now spreading throughout the community. Mikanaku's executive director, Stephanie Paxton, spoke about the significant impact these donations have on remote communities and highlighted how they open doors for the youth.
It's a really special experience to be able to bring this equipment to these kids in the remote northern communities. Most of these kids have never had any hockey gear in their lives before, let alone brand new equipment. When families can even afford to purchase hockey equipment, they often can't even get access to purchase it. So being able to provide opportunities like this for the kids is, it really enables them to learn more about the sport, and it really provides them with new opportunities to participate in activities that they might not otherwise be able to participate in.
The donation arrives just in time for an upcoming hockey tournament at the end of the month. Thank you so much for tuning into this edition of Northwest Newsweek. I'll catch you next time.